Hi children, in that previous synopsis video we discussed about that parallelogram and its synopsis, its properties we discussed in that synopsis video, and here in this video we are going to discuss about that rectangle. Okay, so in that video I told you that maybe you forgot or remember, I don't know that. So again I am saying that before going to learn about that rectangle, rhombus, square, first you have to learn the properties of a parallelogram. Okay, so first see that properties of a parallelogram video. After completion of that worksheet, next go for that rectangle and rhombus. So here we are going to discuss about that rectangle. Okay, so in that parallelogram what we are saying? Okay children, so this is a parallelogram, no? So here opposite sides are parallel. So by using that parallelogram we can say the definition of a rectangle. What is that? In a parallelogram, if each interior angle is 90 degrees, then that is called a rectangle. What is that? In a parallelogram, this is a parallelogram, no? So in a parallelogram, each interior angle, so each angle is 90 degrees. Each angle is 90 degrees. Then we can say that a parallelogram is a rectangle. Okay, in a parallelogram, here actually in a parallelogram, each angle is not equals to 90 degrees. If each angle is equals to 90 degrees, then we can say that is called a rectangle. Okay, so here now this one become as at least one angle is equals to 90 degrees in a parallelogram. Just observe that rectangle and parallelogram. In a rectangle also opposite sides are parallel. Yes or no? Why? Because here in a parallelogram each interior angle, at least one interior angle. So here this is equals to 90 degrees. Then obviously the remaining leftover three angles also equals to 90 degrees. So we can say that that quadrilateral is called a rectangle. Is it clear children? Okay, and in the same way, in a parallelogram, here we can say that the sum of adjacent angles is 180 degrees. Adjacent angles is supplementary. Then also we can say that that is called a rectangle. Okay, so this is the definition about that rectangle. Did you understand that? What is the definition? In a parallelogram, if each interior angle is 90 degrees, then it is called a rectangle. Then it is called a rectangle. Or in a quadrilateral, each interior angle is 90 degrees, then we can say that quadrilateral is called a rectangle. Okay, so like that also we can say. Now here we have that properties of a rectangle. Okay, so just after completion of definition, directly we have to go for that properties only. So here properties of a rectangle. So properties of a rectangle, the first property here how we can say means what properties we discussed in that parallelogram, all the properties related to parallelogram, those all relates to that rectangle also. Okay, why? Because in a parallelogram only one of the angle is equals to 90 degrees. Then the leftover remaining three also become as 90 degrees. Then the parallelogram become as a rectangle. Okay, then the parallelogram become as rectangle. So here we can say that a rectangle is also a parallelogram, no? Yes or no? So here that's why what properties we discuss related to parallelogram, those all properties related to rectangle also. Okay, so here what is that first property of a parallelogram? That is opposite sides are parallel. So here opposite sides are parallel. Okay, next they given that sum of adjacent angles. Sum of adjacent angles of a parallelogram is 180 degrees. So in a rectangle also this is 90 degrees and this is 90 degrees, and as well as these two also 90. Okay, so sum of any two adjacent angles is equals to 180 degrees only, no? So that is also satisfying. What is that next property we discussed in that parallelogram? Actually first property is opposite sides are equal and opposite sides are parallel. Next one is opposite angles are equal. So opposite angles are equal means in a rectangle ABCD, here angle A is equals to 90 degrees, angle C is equals to 90 degrees. So we can say that angle A and angle C are opposite angles only, no? And those two opposite angles are having that same angles here. And in the same way B and D are opposite angles and those two also having that same angles. So we can say that angle B is equals to angle D. So opposite angles are equal in a parallelogram and in a rectangle also. Okay. So next property what we discussed here, that is each diagonal of a parallelogram divides it into two congruent triangles, as well as, and in the same way each diagonal of a rectangle divides it into two congruent triangles. Is it clear, children? And we know that here this is having that how many diagonals? Two diagonals are there. So what properties we discussed in that parallelogram, those all properties there in that rectangle also, no? So all the properties of a parallelogram relates to that rectangle also. Okay. So next some other properties also there, excess properties. Those are angle A is equals to, angle B is equals to, angle C is equals to, angle D is equals to 90 degrees. This is one of the property here added. Okay. Why? Because in a parallelogram this property is not there. But in a parallelogram if this property is there, then that one become as a rectangle. Did you understand, children? Yes. Okay. So this is another property. And here we know that angle A is equals to angle C, angle B is equals to angle D, angle A plus angle D is equals to 180, angle A plus angle B is equals to 180, angle B plus angle C is equals to 180, angle C plus angle D is equals to 180. Is it clear? Okay. So after this one, so here another property is diagonals. Here A, B, C, D. What are the diagonals? AC and BD. So in a rectangle, diagonals are equal. Why? Because in a parallelogram like this, there means here we can say that the diagonals are not equal. After that, each angle is equals to 90 degrees, then that parallelogram become as a rectangle. Now in a rectangle, the diagonals are equal. Okay. So here another property is diagonals are equal. Diagonals are equal. Okay. So these two are the additional properties along with that properties related to parallelogram. Okay. These two are the additional properties related to that rectangle. So once again I am saying that what is a rectangle? In a parallelogram, if each interior angle is 90 degrees, then that is called a rectangle. Okay. And here what is the first property? Means all the properties related to parallelogram, those all properties belongs to that rectangle also. Okay. Those all properties satisfied by rectangle also. Along with that the properties of parallelogram, we have that two other properties are there related to that rectangle. What are those two? Means each interior angle of a quadrilateral is 90 degrees. Okay. And the next one is diagonals of a rectangle are equal. Diagonals are not equal in that parallelogram. Diagonals are equal in that rectangle. That is the difference. Okay. Only one point difference here and one other point added. Is it clear, children? Now here this is about that rectangle. Now here we will discuss about that rhombus. So the next one, children, here in a parallelogram. Okay, these two also related to parallelogram. That's why I told you that I read the properties and definition of a parallelogram properly. So here in a parallelogram, previous if that adjacent angles equals to 90 degrees means any one of the angle equals to 90 degrees, then automatically the leftover remaining three also equals to 90 degrees. Okay. Then here we are saying about that sides. In a parallelogram, one pair of adjacent sides are equal. At least one pair of adjacent sides are equal. Then it is called a rhombus. Okay, once again say that here in a parallelogram opposite sides are parallel and opposite sides are equal, we are saying. Now here in a parallelogram, at least one pair of one pair of adjacent sides are equal. One pair of adjacent sides are equal. Then it is called a rhombus. Then it is called a rhombus. So children, here this is a parallelogram. So here in this parallelogram opposite sides are parallel and opposite sides are of equal length. Now they are saying that in a parallelogram, if that opposite sides, not only opposite sides, adjacent sides are of equal length. Okay, adjacent sides are of equal length means here this is ABCD is a rhombus. ABCD is a rhombus. Here we can say that AB is equals to AD. Okay, and AD is equals to DC. And here DC is equals to BC. And here BC is equals to AB. Okay, at least one pair of adjacent sides are equal. At least one pair of adjacent sides are equal means automatically the leftover another two adjacent sides are also equal. Okay, so in a rhombus all sides are of equal length. In a rectangle all angles are equal. Okay, and here we can say that all the sides of a parallelogram are equal, then it is called a rhombus. Is it clear, children? In that rectangle we discussed about that angles. Here we discussed about that sides of a parallelogram. Okay, so don't be confused that. So in a parallelogram, if at least one pair of adjacent sides are equal, then it is called a rhombus. Okay, now here what are the properties of rhombus? So again, what are the properties here? Again we got that rhombus from that parallelogram only, no? So we can say that rhombus is also a parallelogram, yes or no? Okay, so here from that parallelogram we derived that figure rhombus here. So what properties are there belongs to that parallelogram? Those all properties related to that rhombus also. Okay, so what are the properties here? So first property again, opposite sides are parallel, satisfying, opposite sides are equal. Okay, next adjacent angles, its sum is equals to 180 degrees and opposite angles are equal. Okay, and here along with that properties of parallelogram, here we have that some extra properties, some external properties there. So those are, okay, so here properties of a rhombus. First one, all properties related to parallelogram. All properties of parallelogram. Along with that we have some other properties, no? What are those two means? Here we have that two diagonals. Yes or no? We have that two diagonals. So let us discuss about the diagonals of a rhombus. Here these two diagonals perpendicularly bisects each other. Okay, so before going to that we can say that one of the diagonal of a rhombus bisects that another diagonal of a rhombus, as well as these two diagonals bisect each other at 90 degrees. Okay, so here bisects each other at 90 degrees. So here angle is equals to 90 degrees. AO is perpendicular to OC and BO is perpendicular to OD. Okay, so what is that? AO is perpendicular to BD Next, CO is perpendicular to BD, we know that. Okay, so here we can say that AC also, AC is perpendicular to BD, and here BD is perpendicular to AC. Anyway, we can write that. Okay, so those two diagonals bisect each other. At what angle here? At perpendicular bisectors. So at O is equals to angle is equals to 90 degrees here. Okay, angle AOD is equals to 90, angle AOB is equals to 90, angle BOC is equals to 90, angle DOC is equals to 90. Okay, so at that O here we can observe that 4 right angles. Okay children, now another point is two diagonals of a rhombus divides it into 4 congruent triangles. Okay, one of the diagonal divides it into 2 congruent triangles. Okay, now two diagonals divides that rhombus. Two diagonals of a rhombus divides it into 4 congruent triangles. How many triangles? 4 congruent triangles. Okay children, so these are the properties related to rhombus. Okay, so once again say that in a parallelogram, we know that the definition of a parallelogram. So in a parallelogram, if that each angle is equals to 90 degrees, then it is called a rectangle. And in a parallelogram, at least one pair of adjacent sides are equal, then that is called a rhombus. Okay, now here in a parallelogram, what we will call that? If you know that answer, then comment in that comment section. If you don't know that, then next video we will discuss about that quadrilateral. Okay, once again my question is, in a parallelogram, if each interior angle is 90 degrees and its adjacent at least one pair of adjacent sides are of equal length, then what we will call that quadrilateral. Okay children.